Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever it is, wherever you are, from me, Bishop. It's been a long time since my last vermin. Now, I had the idea for the vermin I'm going to do today for a long time, but I kept thinking about it and mulling about it, and then I was worried about not looking beautiful enough, and I just couldn't get it together, and then I had a bunch of family stuff to do for like 2 weeks, and so it's just been like a month since my last vermin. And now here I am, even though I thought about this vermin like right after I did the last one. So here we are. So today's vermin on this solstice day here up in the northern hemisphere, it's the longest day of the year. That's something folk kind of forget, that it's different depending on which hemisphere of the world you're in. But today it's the longest day up here, and that's a good day to think about the kinds of things I want to think about. So this here vermin today is about Lady Gaga and the oil spill in the Gulf. Now, how I'm going to bring those two things together is kind of a mystery, but I know they need to be talked about together. There's something there. And I tend to go with my gut on these things, as y'all know, and I think there's something vital to be said about Lady Gaga and, that mass of oil in the Gulf. There's something slick about both of them that perhaps can be connected. So first, I'm going to start with Lady Gaga. Now, Lady Gaga, as we all know, is kind of like a cross between Elton John and Madonna. And there's much that's fun about her, but lately I've been kind of annoyed by her. I like her music fine. Some of it's really fun. I enjoy some of the campy sensibility of her work. I understand that she's just a pop star, and so she's not really going for depth in any way, shape, or form. But here's what bothers me, right? Lady Gaga is one of the few female performers who really understands that femininity is kind of a type of drag. Now, that I appreciate about her, and I think that's good. But she's never really willing, I can't speak today, all my words are coming out messed up. She's never really willing to, be ugly or have ugly people in her world. And I mean, any of y'all who've ever seen like a really interesting drag show knows that there are the glamour queen drag queens, like they're just high glam and high femme and all that. And then there's the slightly messed up drag queens, the ones who don't necessarily look beautiful, but look kind of weird and strange and sort of disturbing. And they're doing that on purpose. There's a whole category of drag queens that play along the line of what's called genderfuck. I'm thinking of the Sisters of the Immaculate Conception out in San Francisco, one of my favorite genderfuck performance groups. I don't know if they're still together or not, but just sort of lovely, where it's fabulous and gorgeous and sort of disturbing, and it's really, really awesome. Well, or a John Waters film. You know, John Waters films are absolutely amazing, but one of the things that makes John Waters films amazing is that he's willing to use people who aren't beautiful, but are fascinating. And so what bothers me about Lady Gaga is that while she does some pseudo-disturbing things in her work, like blood from her eyes in some public performance while she hangs from something, it really never is disturbing. And she never uses ugly people, really. I guess the telephone video is a little bit of an exception. And by ugly, I mean interesting ugly. I think ugly can be just as visually stimulating as beautiful, and often more so. But when it comes down to it, Lady Gaga is kind of boring. It's not really that innovative, or she isn't. Her whole shtick isn't. When I say it, I mean her shtick. And, someday she's going to get old. And all those tricks aren't going to work so well. I mean, we rarely see Madonna anymore. Why? Because it don't look as good when you're like that old. Unless you're willing to accept being sort of disturbing, right? I think that as we age, those things become a little weirder and more interesting in some ways. And, unless you're willing to accept that, you're going to get more and more narrow in what you're able to do. I know I'm not quite making sense. I'm still figuring it out as I go along. But I guess it's that you got to be willing to be disturbing to make beautiful work, I think, in the long run. And I mean really disturbing, not just a little disturbing, not just sort of fashionably disturbing. You got to be willing to be ugly to make good artwork. And, well, Lady Gaga isn't really willing to be ugly. And now this sort of relates to the oil spill in a weird sort of way. To change how we are in the world, to change our economy, or to change how we use energy, we're going to have to be willing to be disturbed. We're going to have to be willing to have our routines upset. We're going to have to be willing to give up some stuff. And we don't really seem to be willing to do that yet. Oh, everyone's crying about the horror of the Gulf. But most people are just going on like it's no big deal because their lives aren't really affected yet. We haven't been disturbed yet. We see the ugliness of what's happening in the Gulf, but it really is kind of like a show. It doesn't really affect us. It's out there somewhere. It becomes entertainment. The shock and the horror and all that just becomes spectacle. It doesn't feel real to us. And so we're not really willing to change anything at all. And it only kind of sort of relates, Lady Gaga and the oil spill, but there's something about surface understandings that I think connects them. That oil on the surface is all we're willing to really see. We're not really willing to dig deeper into what does it mean to be dependent on oil? And what could we do to change things? I mean, making this here vermin is all dependent on petroleum and its byproducts. I mean, I'm using a laptop computer, and the signal's going to be sent over a wireless connection, some of which involve oil-based products, and you're going to be watching it on your computer, and excuse me, I had a burp. And there's all kinds of transportation involved, and all of these things. Our whole life is dependent on petroleum products. So here's hoping that Lady Gaga gets some depth and actually does something really interesting instead of sort of slicker than shit on a linoleum floor interesting. And that we really get interested in getting below the surface of that oil slick. That is our national energy policy. I think in both cases, things would get more interesting, would get better. One would make better art and better performance, and the second would make for a slightly better economy, a better world. Just a little bit. Wouldn't fix everything, but it'd fix a few things. So here's for getting below the oil shining on the surface. And that's my hope today for Lady Gaga and our oil-dependent energy policy. Until next time, take care and keep on keeping on.